No, I don't. But we continue like this. Well, now it doesn't work anymore. I think you blocked it. I cannot shift. Okay. So after a couple of years, the idea of the EPR also became a very important part of the European Union waste catalog, so to say, of different initiatives. And other sessions today and tomorrow will focus more on this issue. But as you can see on this slide, we have the so-called Framework Directive, which is an overarching directive. And under this, we have different separate directives for packaging, waste, and then these kind of directives are supposed to be implemented in the different EU countries. But the EU countries also have the opportunity to have their own EPR system, which are not sort of globally within the European Union. And in addition to the directives, there are also other it can be also regulation. We will talk about that later on. There can be different kind of supplement rules, such how to deal with measuring. And there are those BAT and BREF reference, which gives the rule for how to operate different kind of sorting facilities, etc., etc. So there are many, many rules around the system of the EPR. This meeting today and tomorrow, we will focus on packaging, electronic waste, and batteries. But obviously, there are almost an endless, I wouldn't say endless, but a large list of EPR systems which have been introduced in different parts of Europe, different countries, which of course not all of them are common within the European Union. It might sound a little bit difficult for you, but it is important to understand that European Union consists of 27 different member states. So when we impose a new directive, for example, there will be 27 different variations of this directive. So it wouldn't look exactly the same in Bulgaria or in Sweden or on Ireland. There will be some variations, of course, as long as we talk about directives. And then, of course, as I said, you can see here the long list, and it can be even longer. These are the kind of EPR system that we can find in different member states in Europe. So it varies quite a lot. And the way how to build this EPR system are also different. Well, what did we achieve then? And now when I talked about the results, these are how I recognize different kind of reports that have been coming from the European Union, from the OECD, from national investigators, and from research work. And we can see that we have recycled a lot of materials, which is good. However, most of these materials go downcycling. So it was not used for the same purpose as before. It was used for something different. We achieved very little kind of reuse or remake of components. And unfortunately, a very poor effect on the design, which of course is very important to acknowledge. Why did it happen? But unfortunately, that is the fact. And also, the costs have not been so high for introduction of EPR. Instead, sometimes we have had some problems with what we call the race to the bottom, meaning that if you introduce a large number of producers responsible organizations, they are competing, achieving the least possible cost, which means that nobody will take the overall cost. So that's a problem also. There are also some other lessons learned. And initially, when you try to impose a new legislation and when you go into operation, you have to figure out what is a product. And well, it seems to be simple, but I give you an example. You know, these small cups by aluminum that you can use in a coffee machine. This is a packaging. But the same cup, more or less the same, which is used as a candlelight, is not a packaging, at least not in Europe. So this is just an example that it's very important to define the products, of course, because if not, you cannot define the producer. And that's crucial for the whole system, that you can define who is the producer so that you can then impose the EPR and the responsibility on that. Also, during a long period of time, we have a discussion in Europe specifically on whether we should have individual or so-called collective responsibility for EPR. Especially when we introduced the e-waste directive, there was a lengthless discussion about that, and there was some of the greater trademarks that they wanted to have the individual responsibility for sure, because that will sort of create a tightening band between the producer and the customers. But eventually it created anyway a collective responsibility. So today there are very few examples of individual responsibility. Another challenge is, of course, the challenge of free riders. Because when we are talking, for example, about packaging in Sweden, we have like 100,000, and that also only in Sweden, producers. And obviously, there is a big risk that some of the producers will not pay their fee, they will not recognize the system, and it will create a lot of burden in order to enforce the legislation fully. So this is a problem both from environmental point of view, but also from a competition point of view. And then, of course, how to improve the collection and the quality recycling is also a very challenge. As I told you earlier, many times there is a kind of a downcycling of products and materials. And another issue is how to cover and allocate all the cost, because we recognized, especially in Europe for a long time, that quite a large cost of the part of the cost was not covered by the EPR system. It was covered by somebody else, mainly the municipalities who took part in the collection system and also in order to treat waste which was not collected. Because if you think about, for example, packaging waste, especially plastic, maybe 70% of the plastic packaging waste was not collected. So obviously it was treated by someone else, and they was not reimbursed for their cost in order to deal with that. So the allocation of the cost didn't work. And also another issue to think about, how to coordinate with informal sector, like the waste pickers, or municipalities. It depends what the situation looks like in different parts of the world. There are more lessons learned. How can we achieve a long-term finance of this new system, especially when we have products which have a long lifespan, not only to the next months for a packaging, but perhaps for a TV set or for a washing machine or for a vehicle. It can be 10 or 15 or 20 years. How can we build a system which make it enough sustainable over time? And also many times when we experience from Europe that you, as also Mr. Sillier told us about earlier, you started with some kind of trial, and then you try to make it bigger. And therefore, we also recognize that sometimes you actually have to do that because you have to learn by experience how it works. So it can be difficult to sort of blow out the whole system over one night and then you can hope that it will work. Most of the time, it will not work. So you have to go gradually in order to learn. Data collection and registration is also another issue. How do you collect all the data and the registration from all the producers and also from all the recyclers? So you get the correct information about what was the achievement of this system. Because if you don't have the correct information, you cannot make the correct political decision about the future of the EPR. Of course, social involvement is important for general public, and also to avoid any kind of what I call the dirty handling. You can see here, this is waste in Africa, possibly coming from Europe. This is not the system we wanted to create, but it is there anyway. Understanding local conditions is, of course, pivotal because conditions varies not only between regions, Africa, Asia, and Europe, between countries, but also within a country. It's a large difference from a large urban area or from an agriculture area. Public attitude, and also, as I told you before, the possible competition between the PROs can also be a challenge to deal with. This is an endless list of learners, which is it? And not confusing, because we have dealt with this for 30 years now, so we have learned a lot of lessons, and I think it's important to use that. And one of this is, of course, that the EPR was not really the silver bullet solution to the waste management challenge. It is one important tool. I still believe it is a very important tool, but it's not the only one. And it's not only the only sector, it's not the only source of waste management that we have to deal with. We have to deal with all the other sources, such as organic waste, building excavation waste. There are many different sources of waste that we have to deal with. And there is no size fits all, meaning that we are talking many times about EPR like in singularis, like it's one system, but it is never. It's definitely very different if you have an EPR for packaging, for e-waste, for batteries, fishing gears, or whatever it could be. So they are all different the whole time. There is a need to improve EPR, and that was managed in Europe. Last time we revised the so-called Waste Framework Directive. Mikhail will tell you more about this later on. But then there will introduce an improvement of the legislation, which will make, hopefully, the EPR running more correctly. It can also be a challenge, especially in some countries where the ability to pay for is restricted or limited. There can be a problem how to absorb the cost. Many times there is maybe a hope that EPR will be a self-playing piano. It will not. It will mean new cost, and someone had to pay for that cost. So it has to be absorbed in the society in one way or the other. And therefore, you have to think, how can that be done, connecting to your situation. Also, when we introduced the EPR in Europe in the beginning of the 90s, that was within an era of deregulation. That was not only because of the waste management, there was deregulation of the electricity system. Ooh, now we see the problem with that, but that was another issue. But there were many areas of infrastructure which were deregulated. And it was the idea that if we give this kind of responsibility to the industry, they will sort of solve the problem. Unfortunately, it didn't really work that way. I would say the opposite around. The more you give the responsibility to private sector operators, the more you will need regulations in order to steer these operators, because they are private sectors and their main concern is to produce a surplus for their shareholders, which is good. Nothing wrong with that, but they have to be regulated. And therefore, more governance will be needed in order to stipulate these rules. And I just wanted to conclude another thing, because especially today, we are now talking more and more in Europe about deposit return system. It was a little bit outdated a couple of years ago, but now it's coming back more and more. And this is an example from Sweden for aluminum cans on PET bottles and glass bottles. We can see this in many parts of the world. And we are trying now to extend it to other products. But the important thing with this is that we do achieve very, very high recycling targets by means of the DSR system. So I would think, and of course, the DRS is a kind of an EPR system, obviously. And I would think this is something one really should think about, because it's really an efficient system. How then it's operated can be different. Well, so in summary, I would say it's, when you're thinking about EPR, I would say it's not so complicated to make it legal. You can copy legislation from Europe or your neighbor country. It's a little bit difficult to realize it, to make it happen. And as you have seen, it's really how the achievements are limited. We have not received all the achievements we wanted. And therefore, we have to work with the system and to improve it, to make it better and better. And since I think I have a few more minutes more, I wanted to bother you with a formula. I don't know how many of you are engineers. Some of you, very good. Then you know about the thermodynamics second law. The entropy is increasing the whole time, meaning that for every step of handling of a product or a material, losses will occur. So therefore, I would say that the, you know, this very nice picture we had in the beginning by Akiko, you know, with this circular system, it was not really in connection with reality. I give you one example. How much waste is this? Any guess? 120 grams or 100 kilo. That is the total waste amount beyond it, before it happens into meat. By extracting raw materials, processing, etc. For this one, 2 kilograms, but 2.5 tons of waste before it became a computer. So we have to recognize also the hidden waste. So what do I mean with this reuse and recycling algorithm? I built it a little bit together with my youngest son. He is a mathematic. And well, it's very simple. For every loop, you have a kind of a collection efficiency. How much can you collect? How much can you sort out? what happens in the processing and in the upscaling process in order to use this material for something which can be used for the society. And then if you put that back again in the next loop and in the next loop, what will happen? Well, we can give you some example. If we think about, for example, let's tell plastic packaging in Europe. Well, at the moment, we have a collection rate of 35%. Unfortunately, most of the packaging, more than half of the packaging in Europe in plastic today, they cannot be recycled at all. They are mandatory to be that from the year 2030, I think, but today that is not the case. So there will only be 45%, and then we have the cleaning about 85%, and the final processing 90%. That will be 12%. So of the 100% we put on the market with the producer responsibility, we have only in reality 12% real recycling. Now, if we go for the new targets, it will be, the target is 50% and probably cleaning, processing, and so could be improved. This will lead up to about 36%. So I show you this just to give you an idea that recycling is important, but it's not really the answer to the circular economy. We have also to deal with other means such as reuse and so on. And also, as you can see, minimum content, which is now introduced in many legislation, can be restricted because there are not enough materials in order to fill the minimum content. Because this is only for the first loop, the 36%. If you then put that into next loop, it will be only like 18, etc. So after 3 loops, very little be left over. So you will need the whole time to put into new virgin material. And this is clear because we have the second law of thermodynamics, and that we cannot refuse. So therefore, we need longer lifetime recycled materials and less products. And we talk more about that tomorrow. Thank you. This was my presentation. So now we are going to listen to some very interesting experience on how to implement EPR in real life in your region. And I want to give the word to Mr. Liang from Cambodia. And the floor is yours. In the meantime, I can say that we will have a question and answer session in the end of this session. So also if you have some questions to my presentation, we can put that together. So we summarize everything.
Yes, good morning. I will try to be short for my presentation. So as you know that Cambodia, we are just at the beginning of implement and designing the EPR. So just a little bit brief on the data of our waste that you see just only municipal waste we generated around 4 million metric ton per year. But beside that, we collect only around 63% that can collect into the landfill. And while the other around 30% is illegally dumping and burn. And beside that, the composition of our waste, like around 50% the organic, and the other one, plastic, is around 21%. That's why we try to focus on like the EPR is focused on the plastic. That's the data that we collect from our landfill. So we have like around 21% the plastic waste. And beside that, there are a large composition of plastic bags. So here is the status a little bit on the recycling. So we have only around 50 plastic recycling initiative that in Cambodia. So a little bit small, and they are focused on some specific plastic item like PET bottle, plastic bag. And the other, we have a little bit small amount of business that focus on the non-recyclable plastic one. Like we have a Chipmunk one that do the plastic to waste to energy, that they collect the plastic from the coastal area. And the other have like the bridge production and like the alpha production for the road construction from a Japanese company. So we try to think about the solution, the treatment that we cancel our waste, plastic waste. So we come up with two, like the recyclable plastic one. So we hope we can formulate like the PROs, but it's in a lot of discussion and within our internal and the line ministry. But we just propose this one first, and beside that, because we have the existing plastic recycling system, so for that we hope that we can like upgrade the existing one, the local one, and we also have the new propose the new like recycling system that we have a refill or reverse window machine something, and we can testify that and get the feedback how is it going to work for our country. And for the non-recyclable plastic, it's similar, but they are difficult because for the non-recyclable, sometimes we need to collect from the land and as well as in water, because mostly people, they dump it illegal along the river or through the water. So it's really difficult. That's the study tour that we have been in Vietnam to see how Vietnam implement and the EPR. Because as I said that EPR concept is a little bit new for Cambodia, so we need to inform all the key stakeholders, especially the line ministry, to introduce what is EPR, how we're gonna start, and what is the direction or the roadmap that we want. So in this meeting, we conducted with the key stakeholder, and we also give some like the roadmap and show the roadmap and get the inputs from them to see how they react what we propose. So I think it's just the beginning. Yeah. But we get many positive feedback from them, and I hope we can start implement that. So here is I think the most important part for me, and we from Cambodia we have conduct develop some strategies such as the circular national circular economy strategy. We have that attached with the action plan, and also the sustainable consumption and production strategy and action plan that have just adopted. And we have also the what we call the policy metric for short-term strategy that the government just approved newly, that we want to like encourage the recycling and the bioplastic, or as well as the recycling and to ban or to reduce the plastic use, especially the single-use plastic that focus on mainly on the food and beverage. Yeah. And we also like try to integrate this the concept of the EPR into the what we call the new draft of the environmental code. We already include in that, and that's have like we hope that it's gonna be approved soon for that. So here is the way forward that we hope we will deal and start to think about the EPR. So before that, we have a lot of study about that, and they propose that Cambodia should like start with the voluntary EPR because we are the small country. We have like not a big like a big business or the big brand one in Cambodia, not many. So we hope that we try to enforce this first, the voluntary. So think that we think about the low hanging fruit, the item. So that's why we choose the plastic one. And from the study, we also they draw that we should start with the PET bottle because they have like the company, the big company who responsible for that, and it's easy to collect with the existing like recycling facility, because we have like the informal waste picker who are they likely collect that PET bottle, as well as we have the local business recycling business to recycle that. And we have another one is the item is toiletry. We hope we can start that, but the most priority we think about the PET bottle first. And there's another point is the measure to ban. We think about the non-necessary plastic that we could ban. So it's still in the discussion, but we may focus on the packaging in the food and beverage. And then we may pilot and start testing the EPR measure, the different one, and we will do that, and we will get the feedback from our piloting to see how it's the system gonna work and how we can fix and improve the system before we move to the mandatory one. I think here is the our recommendation, and we hope we have proposed that to the Ministry of Environment, and we during the meeting also, and we formulate the policy brief for the EPR, including this to our minister. So I hope that this gonna have discussion, and we're gonna as I said that we gone like, because in our short-term policy metric, we also include for like ban or like reduce especially the single-use plastic that are non-necessary one, and including the tax or the levies. Because in Cambodia, the new investment law also including some incentive, but it's still like not specific for that. But that's the starting point that we have. And as well as the awareness, because like when we talk about the EPR and with the line ministry as well as the private, they still like don't know what is it, and they still afraid of how we implement that one and what it's going to be. And then I think another important point is like the development of the guideline and the standard for the recyclable product, because we don't have that one. And so if we have the recyclable or we produce the recyclable product, so we need the guideline, a specific standard in order to like ensure the quality of product as well as the public health also. Another one is engage the informal and the informal waste picker and their network. So it's really important, because the most important thing for recyclable in Cambodia is the informal waste picker. So they are outside the system, but they are play an important role to collect the waste, the plastic waste for recycling. So it's really important for them, for us to include them. But the main thing is like they don't want to be in the system, because the informal waste picker, they want the job with the very flexible time. So if we enforce this EPO, it's gonna be like a conflict between the informal waste picker and the formal one. So it's the point that we think about how to engage or make them into the system. Yeah. And another one, we hope that we're gonna to formulate because in Cambodia we don't have the recycler association. So it's the point that we think that it should be we should have the association of the recycler so that they can have like the power or have a big impact on recycling. And for that. And this point is for the mandatory phase. I think yes, we also try to integrate some point and the EPR into the regulation already, but to some extent we need to make it more specific and try to engage especially the private and to make clear like the role who gonna do what. In the EPR in the system, so the responsibility of the government, the private, and the informal waste sector. Yeah. And then I think we're gonna have come up with the strong regulation to for example, like the environmental protection law or something that we need to include, or we have the other like sub-degree or prakah of the ministry to state to implement this EPR. And I think the last point is develop the guideline for eco-labeling and certification for environmental product. So in Cambodia, I think this is a really important point because when we do recycling and we got the recyclable product, so how the public could be trust the product. So the eco-labeling and certification gonna prove the product is with the quality and have the environment, and it's gonna have the system as a whole. And yeah. Thank you for my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leon. I suggest now we have been sitting for almost an hour. So if you stand up, all of you, and then you can go around your table. We can have a circular economy. Clockwise, only one loop, and then you sit down again. For you, and you will have a long loop over there. Go ahead, stay up and just walk around the table. Yeah, this is this morning's exercise. Yeah, this should be on YouTube, I think. People will be thinking what we are doing here, having the circular economy in reality. Okay, thank you very much. And now I would like to introduce Mrs. Evie from Philippines, who will also give us her thoughts when it comes to the situation on Philippines. The floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Ivy Joyce De Pedro from Philippines, from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. So now I will be discussing our very own Republic Act number 11898 because we have just, the Congress have just enacted this law and we are now in the process of drafting the implementing rules and regulations for us to operationalize this RA 11898. Entitled Extended Producer Responsibility Act of 2022. This is an act institutionalizing the extended producer responsibility on plastic packaging waste. So this EPR only focuses on the plastic packaging waste. It amended partially our law, which was enacted in 2000. So imagine there was a 22 years gap before we were able to enact this EPR law, that Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2000. So it lapsed into law by inaction of our president on July 23, 2022. And in the Philippines, laws take effect 15 days following the completion of its publication. So the effectivity date of this law is on August 13, 2022. It is declared as a policy of our state to institutionalize the extended producer responsibility mechanism as a practical approach to efficient waste management, focusing on waste reduction, recovery and recycling, and the development of environment-friendly products that advocate the internationally accepted principles on sustainable consumption and production, circular economy, and producers' full responsibility throughout the life cycle of their product. EPR is defined in our law as environmental policy approach and practice that requires producers to be environmentally responsible throughout the life cycle of a product, especially its post-consumer or end-of-life cycle. So, of course, as discussed earlier, the primary purpose of this EPR is for us to shift from linear to circular economy. As we know, the complex waste challenge that we are experiencing is a result of linear economic model, which follows the take, make, and waste process. This linearity is also contributing to marine litter and significant greenhouse gases emissions across the chain. Increasingly, there has been a shift from waste management to circular economy, acknowledging the need for a more transformative approach and recognizing the multiple benefits transitioning to circularity can offer, including the economic growth, more equally shared benefits, and more sustainable relationship with nature. In this way, the life cycle of products is extended and waste is significantly reduced. When a product reaches the end of its life, its materials are kept within the economy whenever possible. This can be productively used again and again, thereby creating further value. The newly enacted EPR, while not the only solution, as stated a while ago, is an important enabler to accelerate our transition to circular economy. Let me share with you some of the Philippines' key policies and framework, of course, in partnership with UNDP. These are the key policies and framework. First is the nationally determined contribution, which commits a 75% greenhouse gas emission reduction and avoidance by 2030. Of course, circular economy and sustainable consumption is among the identified mitigating measures against climate change that would bring about co-benefits, including green jobs and investments. Also, the Philippine Action Plan for Sustainable Consumption and Production, which has been adopted as the roadmap and guidance document of government agencies to operationalize sustainable consumption and production practices in the country, and National Action Plan on Marine Litter, which was led by the DENR and supported by the UNDP. Taking a holistic approach, this aims to prevent and significantly reduce marine litter pollution, foster sustainable consumption and production, and promote a circular economy while mitigating further environment, social, and economic risk. It specifically identified strategies to promote sustainable consumption and production and circular economy, where having an EPR policy is a part of it. So, as I've said earlier, the law is still fresh And we were just given by the Congress 90 days to draft or to finalize an IRR to operationalize this. And just recently, we rolled out our public consultations with different stakeholders in the major islands of Luzon, of the Philippines, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, covering different sectors from the industry, from the academe, from the business sector. So we are targeting for its approval this November 11, 2022. So by November 11, 2022, it should have been finalized and signed by the DENR Secretary. Of course, we cannot do that without the help of UNDP. So once the DENR, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, issue the IRR, at the same time, it shall also formulate the national framework for EPR for all types of product waste, because the EPR law, RA 11898, only focuses on plastic packaging. So also then, as a consequence, obliged enterprise shall establish phase-in EPR programs for plastic packaging, and there would be annual recovery targets for the industry. So these are what we have done so far. We are already done with the October 21, 2022, and on November 3, 2022, we will be presenting the final draft of our implementary rules and regulations to the stakeholders. So if you are interested in the implementing rules and regulation of the EPR law of the Philippines, we are inviting you to be part of it. So some of the institutional changes of the EPR in our present law, the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2000, is that it revised the composition of the National Solid Waste Management Council, Commission. It redefined the function of the National Ecology Center and designated the EMB Assistant Director as its head. It also provided for a framework to deal with the framework for all types of product waste and not just focusing on the plastic packaging. And yes, as I've said, we were only given 90 days by the Congress to finalize our implementing rules and regulations. It also provided for fines to be imposed because of the principle, polluters must pay principle, and gave the jurisdiction to impose the fines with the Pollution Adjudication Board, from where I belong. It also provided for mandatory review of the non-environmentally acceptable product list within 1 year and of the EPR law for possible remedial legislation, and also joint congressional oversight. It's not working. So let's go first to our framework. Of course, as I've said, the Congress mandated the EMB to formulate a national framework and the IRR within 90 days from the effectivity of the law. In the framework, of course, it should be adopted for all types of product wastes. This shall be through issuance of a department memorandum circular after due consultation with the National Solid Waste Management Commission. The confirmation and adoption of the priority setting criteria, the initial list of priority products and product waste, and time frame for the development of EPR mechanism for other type of product wastes, it is targeted to be completed by September 1, 2023. The prioritization shall be determined based on the applicable law covering the product waste, other types of municipal solid waste, such as general packaging waste, toxic substances. Of course, it is not yet included, but of course, subject to the existing conventions. Issuance of appropriate administrative action by the government, targeted to be done by November 11, 2024. Issuance of appropriate administrative action for the application of specific priority implementation of EPR for toxic substances to be determined, and review of possible revision of the list of EPR priority products and product waste under RA 9003 by November 2025. So far, the law provides that our EPR framework should include two aspects. First is the reduction of non-environment friendly products, which may include adoption of reusable products or redesign of the products to improve its reusability, recyclability, or retrievability. Inclusion of recycled content or recycled materials in a product. Adoption of appropriate product refilling systems for retailers. Viable reduction rates plan, information and education campaign schemes, and appropriate labeling of products, including the information thereon for the proper disposal of waste product. Second aspect is to include product waste recovery programs aimed at effectively preventing waste from leaking to the environment, which may include waste recovery schemes through redemption, buyback, offsetting, or any method or strategy that will efficiently result in high retrievability, high recyclability, and resource recovery of waste products. Diversion of recovered waste into value chains and value-adding useful products through recycling and other sustainable methods. Transportation of recovered waste to the appropriate composting, recycling, or other diversion or disposal site in the country. Also, cleanup of waste leaked to the coastal areas, public roads, and other sites. Establishment of commercial or industrial scale recycling, composting, thermal treatment, and other waste diversion or disposal facilities for waste product when investment therein is viable. And of course, this is very important, partnership with our local government units, communities, and the informal waste sectors. It's kind of small. So, based in our consultations with the stakeholders, these are the identified wastes that are needed to be included in the framework. Of course, the general packaging and non-environmentally acceptable product, tire, automotive and industrial batteries or used batteries, vehicles, electric and electronic equipment, and textile. So we have identified the problems arising from those products and if it can be addressed. So that is what we have done in our public consultations. Also, other products which can be priority, however, data to confirm evidence about their priority is lacking, such as food or food waste, edible or mineral oil, glass products, tobacco, and cigarettes. So let's now go to the IRR. A while ago, I was talking about the national framework. And now we now go to the IRR. This includes, as I've said, our EPR law only focuses on plastic packaging. So our law categorized plastic packaging into different classification: flexible, rigid, plastic bags, and polystyrene. So as per our law, EPR programs to be submitted by the industries to the National Ecology Center should include their EPR program, whether it be implemented individually, collectively, or through PRO. So oblige enterprises information, contact information, specific type of plastic packaging materials and product brands. It is a policy now that we are talking about the IRR in our public consultations that we will follow the brand. So companies which would produce specific plastic packaging waste, their own brand will be what we will call their plastic footprint, whatever they will be producing. So later on, I will present the target plastic neutrality for the industries to comply. Also, verifiable volume or weight of the plastic packaging brought into the market within a specified period. That is what I'm saying, plastic footprint. Target volume or weight of plastic packaging waste for recovery, reuse, and recycling. Other EPR programs such as the redesign of plastic packaging to improve reuse or recyclability, labeling of packaging materials to facilitate recovery, reuse, recycling, or proper disposal of packaging materials, status of implementation, and status of compliance. Obliged enterprises in the Philippines only focuses on large enterprises. By large enterprises, as per our MSME law, those that have capitalization of 100 million Philippine peso. So what is interesting in this law is that it specifically exempted MSMEs. However, there may be a loophole that, of course, even if they are not large enterprises, though however small they may be, but if we are to consolidate all of the product wastes from them, of course, it will be chaotic. But they are only encouraged in our law to comply with this EPR program. We will only penalize large enterprises who would not be able to comply within the specified target compliance. So obliged enterprises may comply either individually, collectively, or they may authorize a PRO for the purpose of establishing a viable platform to implement their EPR program. This is what I'm telling. By the end of 2023, of course, the target compliance is 20% of the plastic footprint. So depending on how much they were able to produce, they have to recover 20% of that. By the end of 2024, it's 40%. By the end of 2025, it's 50%. By the end of 2026, 60%. By the end of 2027, 70%. By the end of 2028 and every year thereafter, 80%. So depending, of course, if to the classifications that I presented earlier, whether it is flexible, you have to categorize, because if you have produced a certain amount of flexible, then you have to recover 20% of that flexible, respectively. So, of course, the law also provided for punishable acts to be determined by the Pollution Adjudication Board for failure to register, for falsification of documents, misdeclaration, employment of any scheme to maliciously evade the responsibility, and tamper its compliance. What is interesting here is that the law prescribes high penalty for violation of the EPR law. For first offense, 5 million pesos to 10 million pesos. And it will be the Pollution Adjudication Board which will provide for the graduated penalties, because it only provided for the minimum and maximum. Lastly, in our public consultations, these are what we have encountered as raised by the different stakeholders. and of course, with the help of UNDP. We have to be prioritizing the establishment of the National Ecology Center, because while it is already in place, it is not yet operationalizing. So we have to have people with technical expertise, information, training, and network services for the implementation of the provisions of the EPR law, rather. Also, general support to designing and implementing and monitoring or auditing of the EPR programs. We can learn from existing models being implemented in the country and globally. That is why I know that I will learn a lot from here. Also, the LGU seems to be unaware of their roles for the implementation of this EPR law. So we have to capacitate our local government units through information and education campaign, not only with the LGU, but including the informal sector, ensuring inclusivity in the implementation, both the inclusion of informal sector and ensuring they benefit from the transition. Also, a while ago, while I was listening, there is really a challenge on the manner of collection, because yes, you can say that this is the law. You have to recover how much, the percentage, depending on the year. But how do you collect? Given the archipelagic geography of the Philippines, we have encountered, well, it's in theory right now, because we are still in the process of drafting the implementing rules and regulations. That what will happen if a certain company just focus on the highly urbanized area? That is what we call geographic inclusion. They focused on, for example, in the Philippines, it's Metro Manila, our highly urbanized area. What will happen now to the marine litter in our coastal areas, in the rural areas, if they are to focus only in the highly urbanized area? So that is one thing that we want to address in our IRR. So that would be all. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Very interesting, and especially the last thing you highlighted about the geographical inclusion. I will call it cherry picking. Now I leave the floor to Mr. Thi from Vietnam. Please, the floor is yours.
This presentation I have changed to present to our friend from Cambodia and also Laos. Now I want to share with you, but briefly. We have the EPR since 2005, but voluntary EPR until 2020. And then after the Law on Environment Protection 2020, we have the EPR. We have please click on the screen. Thank you. But after 2020, we have the mandatory EPR. So in this presentation, I want to show you the 5 experience, 5 content related to the construction and implementation, EPR implementation in Vietnam. As I present that, we have the EPR from the 2005 with the voluntary. And then after 2022, we have the mandatory with the recycling rate and recycling methods imposed to the enterprise. After the implementation, I conclude in the 10 steps to implement EPR in Vietnam. So we the first step, we define which agency will be develop the EPR in Vietnam. And then we establish the EPR national platform, which collects many members from the industry, from the government, and from the association society to make an agreement between the industry. And then we have the awareness raising awareness campaign. So we have many consultation and dialogue with the industry. Then we form the EPR principle in Vietnam in the law, in the LAP 2020. And then we have the detailed regulation to degree. Well, what we put on the LAP, I will present after, but it's principle regulation. But in the EPR regulation, we have more detail and can be implementation. And then we have many guidelines, and we build the EPR portal. Now we establish the implementation organization. So we establish the EPR national platform. You have the function to develop the EPR in Vietnam. And then we have many members from the 4 sections here. You can see the government, organization, association, the producer, and the recycler. So we have achieved many agreements and supporting from that. We have many advisory from the other technical or an economy advisor. So they help us to develop the EPR in the regulation and also in when we implementation. The campaign, raising awareness campaign is very necessary, important, because EPR in Vietnam is new and it's very hard, it's burden for the enterprise. So we need to understanding and comprehensive from the industry, so they know what is the EPR and what is the profits from EPR. And then we have many dialogue with the business. And then we convene the government and National Assembly, so they support us to implement the EPR. So what is the principal EPR in Vietnam? We following the EPR model in the world. And then we determining the type of product and packaging that must be collected, treated, and recycled. Recycling rate and recycling standard must be imposed. This is very important to make the voluntary EPR become a mandatory EPR. So we use the market rules in the EPR. I will present after that. And then we have many mechanisms to based on the tripartite cooperation between the state, enterprise, and society. And of course, we have many policy to improvement the collecting, recycling, and treatment infrastructure. This is the EPR. What is the EPR? EPR is the extended producer responsibility producer, means that the producer must have the recovery or recycling the product they put on the market. But the purpose of EPR is there are two main purposes. The first one is creating the step of fund to support the collecting and recycling waste from the product and packaging. To make a fund, help the state to recycling and to waste management. But the second purpose is more important. It's the most important, I think so. is that change the product design using raw materials or fuels to make environmentally friendly product, prolonging product life cycle, or easy collecting, reuse, and recycling. This purpose to promote the circular economy. Because based on the EPR, we have the artist from the law on environmental protection. We have two kinds of the responsibility on the EPR. The first one is the responsibility on recycling. You apply for the recyclable product or packaging. So they, as a producer, they have two ways to fulfill their responsibility. The first one is they can organize the recycling by themselves. If not, they can financial contribution to the VEPF, Vietnam Environmental Protection Fund, to fulfill their responsibility. This responsibility for the recyclable material. But with the unrecyclable material, or it difficult to take back, the producer must be paid for the VEPF to fulfill their responsibility. So we define the 6 group of product and packaging must be recycled. Must be recycled. You can see it. And from the 2024, they will be implemented. What is the mandatory recycling rate or recycling method? In the decree, we define what is the material must be recycling, more detail, and then the recycling rate and recycling method. That must be obligation. All the producer put this material into the market must be follow this rule. So this is the recycling rate and recycling method. And they have many ways to do to fulfill their responsibility. You see, self-organization, or organizing recycling, or financial contribution. So they allow the PO to engage in this process. With the second type of responsibility imposed to the unrecyclable material, we have the 6 group of product and packaging related to the plastics. So we define in the decree, very clear. So now we have many producers, they pay to the VEPF to fulfill their responsibility. So this is the cost norm. This is the cost norm of the payment. You see, based on the item or the balloon size, we collect the money from the government, from the enterprise, and we have many activity to implement. We have the EPR national portal, and of course we have the sanction for the violation. Yeah, the sanction. You can see this, the EPR model in Vietnam, with the Monterey and the National EPR Council and Vietnam EPR office, the PRO here. We now set up this system in Vietnam. Conclusion, you see, EPR in Vietnam is a mixed mandatory system with the recycling responsibility for recyclable material and treatment responsibility for the non-recyclable. And in the first type of responsibility, we use the mix for the organized lead by the industry, recycling, and then we allow, if they don't they can organize, they can financial contribution to the VEPF. So they have many ways to fulfill their responsibility. The challenges in Vietnam now, we have three, I think so. The mandatory EPR system is new, many things to do. Now we have many protests from the government and also from the industry. And the undeveloped collection and recycling infrastructure. The habit of the sorting waste at source is weak. The collection system is weak. The recycling system is still outdated and small scale. Most of them is craft bleach. And of course, it's very hard to use the contribution financial from the enterprise. We must be used their money efficiency, and they must justify with this. If not, the EPR is failed. And you can see the EPR is the most important part of the circular economy, because the EPR they affect all states of the product life cycle to achieve the criteria of the circular economy. We have the circular economy in the Law Environment Protection 2020 itself. So EPR is the mandatory, but the circular economy is voluntary. The EPR is here, you can see here, but they can affect to this state, and this state to make the circular economy in Vietnam become a mandatory or half mandatory. I hope that with this regulation, the circular economy in Vietnam become better. So we have many things requirement to do. As we established the EPR Council or many guidelines. So this is my presentation. Sorry for this, for the overtime.
Thank you very much. And now I want to ask our panelists to come here together with me. And we have a few minutes for some questions. So Mr. Liang, Ms. Evie, and Mr. T, if you come closer here. So, yeah, obviously you are also welcome to have questions, but in the meantime, I wanted to ask you all three the same question. And my first question is like this, that if you think about when implementing EPR in your country into operational conditions, which seems to be you are very close to right now, which are if you were to select the two most critical aspects, which are the challenge for you in order to have this implementation to run as you wish? what would you then select as the challenges? What about Philippines?
Thank you. As I've said earlier in my presentation, the most pressing concern, the two most pressing concern would be number one, the information education campaign to the LGUs, because our local government units seem to be unaware of their would-be contribution to the implementation of this EPR law. They are still not equipped with expertise, with knowledge for them to be helpful to the national government. And also, as I've said earlier, the challenge on collection, because yes, we have our law in place, but establishments or enterprises may comply, but they may not be able to look into the areas which are in the rural areas, only in the highly urbanized city, just for them to comply with the law. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And what about you?
Yes, for me, I think the most challenging is in Cambodia is like the financial, because we know that that the EPR is mainly for like the private sector to financially contribution. So they may have a sanction or like not happy with that one. So that's why they may try to like to slow down the implementation. And another one is like because of as I said before, we may think about the conflict between the informal rice speaker and the formal one, because it's gonna happen, because like if we implement that, it's gonna have the formal recycle that one, and then for the informal one, we need to think about. And the lastly, like I said, because we know that that's gonna be the like the difficulty for the SME, the local business one, because if we not think about that, they have a limit capacity and fund to do the EBR, while the big one they have a resource to do that.
Yeah, I see.
As you know that EPR in Vietnam is now implementation. So we have our system, EPR system in Vietnam. Of course, we have many challenges when we develop EPR developing in Vietnam, but now it's implementation. So many producers, they organize themselves, the recycling is good. But the other, they financial contribute to the VPF to support the recycling in Vietnam. So the most challenges is the effective use of producers' financial contribution. Now we collect many money from the enterprise. So how we use this in transparency and correct purpose. And the enterprise must be satisfied with this activity. It's our challenges. If not, as I present, the EPR in Vietnam will fail because they don't believe in the EPR now. So that now we develop the regulation to use the financial contribution. So that's our challenges now.
I see. Thank you very much. I now want to give you the opportunity also to, if you have any questions, we can start here. You can also say where you are from, so we know. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the presentations that you have, and also colleagues from different countries, from Philippines, Cambodia, and Vietnam. I would like to have your perspectives on the other side of the regulatory framework, because you mentioned that it is important to enforce the regulatory frameworks or policies to the industries and also to the communities. But we need to make sure that the regulatory frameworks or the policies that you are implementing is not going to discourage the industries and also the communities on this kind of mechanism. And I would like to learn from you whether it is very important to make sure that the industries have the level of the capacity to work on the required technology. And also that the implementations of the program itself is not going to ruin the industries in the countries, right? And so the activities is also to improve the social or the welfare of these communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I leave it for you first, because I would say from my side, from Sweden or maybe for Europe, I think this is something we have been struggled with for the past 30 years, just to handle that little bit kind of a conflict. How large can you go in order to fulfill the targets, but also considering how much cost burden can you put on the producers in the end of the day? It's really an interesting question, I would like to say, but I leave it to you. Maybe we should start from the right with Vietnam and then Cambodia and lastly our legal advisor. Go ahead, please.
Actually, for the implementing in Vietnam, we have many dialogue with the business. So, but they still have some protesting from them. But we show the profits from the EPR and the role EPR on the circular economy, and they earn many profits from EPR. So that EPR is not the tool for environmental protection, but also the tool for economy. Because in Vietnam, the collecting and recycling infrastructure is not good. So many raw material must be imported from the other country. Most of them from the Thailand, the aluminum for the beverage can, you know. So we use the EPR for develop the recycling in Vietnam, so they understand about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, from Cambodia, because we are at the beginning of the implement EPR, but like most company, the big one, they are like the foreign company, and they have their their corporate social responsibility, like they have mandatory to do this kind of thing, I think. But we also care about the local one, so that's why we introduce the voluntary first with the low-hanging fruit, like the pet portal that have the clear responsibility, the clear company who are responsible for that, and then we can see how can we go far with the EPR, and then yeah.
See, and lastly,
in the Philippines, well, if their countries are already in the process of implementing, well, it will be premature for me to say, since our IRR is still on its way. We are on the process of drafting it. However, as I recalled from our public consultations with the industry, they are saying that, how do we implement this? We have business to run. So this will incur additional cost. And of course, in reality, that additional cost would be passed down to the consumers in effect. And as you've said, it is already a problem years back. So we will struggle to to have a solution for that. But insofar as to have them at least have them incentives that is already in place with our EPR law, but because the EPR law provides that in the implementation of their EPR programs, should it be effective or successful, there would be tax incentives for the enterprises so that they would be motivated to implement their EPR programs.
Thank you. I think we have time for one question here more. We will see. Otherwise, we will have to go for the afternoon. But go ahead.
Thank you. Just want to ask the colleagues from the Philippines and Cambodia about the question about the impacts of the EPR policy on informal sector. So yeah, we know that the informal sector have been part of the recycling process in Vietnam, and I guess it's also in Cambodia and the Philippines. So do you foresee any impact, or would they be like a more marginalized once we formalize the recycling process by EPR policy? So yes, just thank you.
Yeah, start with Philippines, please.
Our EPR law so far is only penalizing large enterprises. Of course, we cannot oversee we cannot overlook the impacts of the informal settlers. That is why we will be having our utmost effort to have information and education campaign involving the informal sectors rather. And also, as I've said earlier, in our RRR, we will put an effort to include that the large enterprises would recover wastes, not just from the highly urbanized area, but focuses on areas that have large informal sectors so that we can address that geographical inclusivity.
Yeah, for Cambodia, because that's just I said before, we are now consider about that include in the EPR, but it's like the difficult thing because like if we want to include them in the system, it's like it's depend on them too how they want to like be in or the system or not. But it's gonna be like the other mechanism or like to like put them and maybe we can put them outside, but we may take care of them too. That's another option. But the thing is like to build capacity of themselves, how they can do with the EPR2 collection or improve themselves first. Yeah.
If you have a question as well, short one.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And as I have two questions, also open-ended for the ones that have a response. First one is how you consider the insertion of this EPR scheme in the already existing municipal solid waste collection system. It means that these funds will be reverted to municipality to support this collection system so it can go back to industry, or this is totally a part system. And as the colleague from Vietnam said, municipalities will have to continue to, you know, look for solutions for the already problems existing with this collection and disposal. And the second one is that how, if you have considering the final solutions inside the country for this scheme. For example, plastics is a general issue that we face, at least because we know that many types of plastics simply cannot be recycled. So in many countries, they don't have the internal capacity to recycle these plastics, for example. And there is the global move that many countries prohibit the international transport of plastic wastes. And there is the potential new global agreement on plastics that can even prohibit even more this transboundary movement. So basically the only solution inside the country could be incineration and recover energy. So have you considered also this type of complications downstream when operationalizing the EPR schemes? So thank you.
Yeah, that was two tricky questions, so, which I think will need quite long answers, but we only have time for short answers. So let's start with the first issue about how to deal with the municipalities' responsibilities concerning the introduction of EPR.
As per the first question, perhaps if I remember it correctly, the question was like the funds that will be generated from the EPR programs, would it be returned back to the municipality? Mm-hmm. Of course, we have this National Solid Waste Management Fund, which would come from the proceeds of the fees generated from the EPR and also the fines and penalties imposed. We will integrate that to the municipalities for them to have their own programs, which would, of course, support the manner of collection, because the main implementer of our solid waste management acts are, of course, the local government. So we need to operationalize them. On the second question,
it was basically about
how to
if you
address
thought about
plastic.
manage plastic outside your country.
Yes. In our EPR law, we also penalize importers, of course, but we cannot say that we can address it immediately. But in our proposed target compliance, when they are to comply with the 80%, for example, of recovery, well, it may be ideal, but we envision that companies or enterprises would take a lot of plastic wastes because they have their target compliance. And because if they cannot comply, they would be penalized. So they would take an effort to locate those plastics which may be regulated, recovered. That is what we are envisioning in this law.
May I ask Vietnam to elaborate first and then to end with Cambodia?
For the community,
communities,
the lower local government, they receive directly from the VPF the financial from the VPF to collecting and recycling the solid waste and treatment also solid waste treatment. So through the VPF we support them to the money to upgrade the solid waste management, the vehicle, I mean the equipment, many activities they can do to after fund from the EVPF. For the second question, it means that the solid waste, I mean the control the solid the waste from through the border, right?
Yeah.
We have many. We prohibit the waste importing waste from the other country, but we allow the import the raw material from the other country, and we control this process by the standard, by the regulation, and of course we have punishment, the penal code for this activity. So it's very strictly, and in Vietnam we do not allow the transboundary the waste.
Okay, please.
Yes, for Cambodia, For the waste collection is done by the company, private company, and it's paid by the Ministry of Economy and Finance through the municipal. But just for that, we subsidize a lot for the waste collection because the fee that we get from the household is not enough. So the government need to cover that. And so we hope that for the EPR, that fund, it can channel to through because in Ministry of Environment, we have the social environmental fund. So that can go to that and cover the collection one. For the second question, because like Cambodia is not the main plastic producer, so, and I think it may need the international we have now they are initiate the plastic legally binding now in discussion, and now we are trying because of Cambodia we don't have for the custom we don't have the separate between the plastic or single-use plastic within the normal material the plastic one. So now we are discussing about the separate code of the custom code to divide, and then we can track this plastic and have the solution for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, I want to close this first session. Thank you so much for taking part of this activity, and especially I think we should give a large hand to our panelists for a very interesting contribution